And of course, the old discovered mate, I would actually like to call this the Reti mate, right? Where he sacked his queen on d8 and played bishop to g5 and bishop to d8 when the king ran to c7, as there were pawns here, rook on this square, knight on that square. So the Richard Reti mate followed by
start at the beginning. Basically, you're going for an AP class in chess when you study Kasparov or Magnus. And if you've not passed all of your primary school classes, your fundamentals, your absolute basics, which are Lasker, Capablanca, Morphy, Alekhine, then it becomes very difficult to jump into science at a higher level. Studying the game in its entirety is the way to go. You have to develop all parts of your game equally in order to increase in strength, because opponents are going to be weak in various areas of the game, and if you can win 2 out of 3 of the areas of the game, then like on American Idol or any of those voting survivor shows, you will move on to the next. Coordination on a daily basis is always going to benefit you.
Arsenal fan Richie said, "Those bishops are pretty respectable."
They are, aren't they? Where are you going now? And I get a full rook out of this mess because we set up
Nope,
this
not an opening mistake.
little trap.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, grasshoppers. Happy New Year 2026. I'm going to start off a little bit correctly with at least a 10 to 15 minute stream on a question that was posed earlier this morning in my bullet arena, I believe, and that was how to prepare for a tournament. So there are several factors in what you need to do or what you might want to do to prepare for a tournament. Let's just say that I'm playing in the Reykjavik Open in March. Now I have 3 months to prepare, a little bit less, 2.5 months, depending on the exact date. And I can actually plan for this particular tournament in a number of ways. The number one way that I like to recommend on a daily basis preparing for the tournament is building character. Building character means that you have to actually be willing to not move the pieces. And most players actually must move the pieces. They don't think they're playing chess unless they're moving the pieces. One of my favorite stories in my early coaching days. Good morning, Nico Williams. How are you? One of my favorite stories in my early coaching days was we had 2 national champions, Linda Diaz, who was most recently featured on the PogChamps recently, versus 9 or 10-time national champion Lilia Poteet, national girls champion for every age group all the way up, a couple times over for each age group on a few occasions. Basically, they were playing each other, and they were sitting, and they were calculating, they had a clock, and the young man walks in, and he looks at Linda, who's playing white, and he looks at Lilia, who might be playing black, who obviously was playing black, and I believe it was like an accelerated dragon, and it had just reached like the later stage of the opening / early middle game, probably around move number 13 or so. And he asks them, "What are you guys doing?" And Lilia sort of looks at him very confusedly and says, "We're playing chess." And he goes, "Well, how come you're not moving?" And that sums it up for the American public for the most part. I would almost want to call bullet chess American chess, because if we can play chess without thinking, without appreciating the process of finding a good move, that would be the summary of bullet. But if, for whatever reason, you wish to become a better player, you're going to have to appreciate the process. So, for example, in this particular case, we have several really interesting options. Now, we have to master the 3 questions. These are things that you need to write down for yourself and perhaps even write them down even more so if you find yourself making these mistakes. First off, the 3 big questions promoted by Jakob Ackard. Where are the weaknesses? What's the opponent's big idea? And which are the best and worst placed pieces? So, for example, for white, in this particular case, this is the rook that's not doing anything. This knight could easily be outposted on d4. This bishop is already guarding the queen. This rook is already on an open file and ready to go to the 7th rank. In fact, perhaps in this position, if this bishop were not already on a2, now we can examine where are the weaknesses, right? And we can see that this bishop is only defended by the queen is only defended by that bishop. And then we can ask ourselves, what is our opponent's big idea? For example, in this position, they may not have had a concrete idea as they just captured a pawn on a2. So this process of finding a good move must occur over and over again. So, for example, in this position, we could improve our knight. We could improve our rook. We've got candidate moves of knight to d4 and rook to d1. But if we ask ourselves, where are the weaknesses? We can already see that these 2 bishops could be placed on an open file. So queen takes a5, rears its head, and we're able to skewer these 2 pieces and win material. Now, once you are up in material, now this brings us to the next stage of the game that does need to be prepped a little bit before you play in a tournament, usually in the distant future, not usually if you're playing tomorrow. If you're playing this weekend in a tournament, and today is Thursday, there's a very good chance that you're not going to have time to work on your end game skills. There's a very good chance that you're going to have to stick with or stay with the openings that you are currently playing. You're not going to be able to make any big opening changes. For me, playing in Reykjavik in March, ideally, I'm not going to be playing the same openings that I'm playing today. I am, in fact, going to change all of my openings. Before I play in Reykjavik, I'm not going to be playing the Birds opening, the Alekhines defense, the Modern defense, although nothing's off the table. I'm going to be a completely well-rounded player when I play in a tournament several months from now. I'm going to prepare appropriately. Now, you are playing tomorrow. If you are playing tomorrow, I highly recommend Puzzle Streak a lot. Because when you are doing Puzzle Streak, you get to work several parts of your game. You get to work the tactical aspects, the calculation aspects, and the endgame aspects. So while we are preparing or discussing preparing for a tournament, we're going to talk about a few different things that go on. In many cases, we always have to ask, what is the opponent's big idea in a position? And if they are allowed to move, what could they want to do? Now, in this particular moment, I don't necessarily see a direct threat, but I do see that the weakness here, in this particular case, the knight on e4 is guarded by the rook, and the queen on d8 is also guarded by the rook. So we have a simple tactical removing the defender exercise, aka the overloaded piece, the rook on e8. And in this particular instance, we have perhaps the more active king. Now, this is a late middle game, early end game position. There are quite a number of pieces on the board, but we do have to consider for a moment what is going on. Now, interestingly enough, with another question, I also call it like the 4 who's. The 4 who's. Yes, it's not like Hedwig from Harry Potter, but the 4 who's. So you've got, what is the opponent's big idea? Where are the weaknesses? Which are the best or worst placed pieces? For example, if you can't find a way to improve your worst placed piece, you can perhaps unseat your opponent's best placed piece. You can perhaps make a plan to exchange off or dislodge, derail your opponent's best placed piece's plans. And in this particular case, we have the who has the better end game, right? We have three connected pawns on the queen side to three isolated pawns. We have a rather poorly placed bishop on h8. The next who we could say is who has the better piece harmony. And in this particular case, it has to go to white. White has the better piece harmony. However, white is down a piece. So the piece harmony, the two rooks working together, has to make up for the fact that black has an extra knight. Each side has one bishop and two rooks, and we have to look at this position and assess it very carefully. What's going on here? And because our opponent has an extra knight, we already know that we are not the person that answers the question, who has the better endgame, because we're down in material. This means that we have to win the game in the middle game, albeit the late middle game, as it turns out right now. So we have forcing moves that we could examine in this particular position. We have both rooks coming to the g7 square, and then it revolves a little bit of calculation. The king only has one move in reply if we use the rook on g1. And because we're using the rook on g1, the king is forced to go to f6, and suddenly our poorly placed bishop on h8 is bothering our opponent's king. So it ends up as Pegasus just pointed out, namaste, Ron, that it's checkmate in two moves. Now, in this particular position, the good news here is that all moves by this rook, with the exception of f7, along with seventh rank, are checkmate. All moves that go in retreating could actually lose the game if the king is allowed to escape. So therefore, I should say e7 is off the cards. So we have four correct answers for white. And because they all result in checkmate, I know that Lichess has an algorithm. Lichess has an algorithm that says all combinations that end in checkmate are correct. So we could even put that over there, even though the best move could have been rook to b7, c7, or d7. Any move that doesn't allow the king to capture the rook would be fine. Is there an arena tournament today? I'm afraid that the arena tournaments are over and were completed around 9 a.m., unfortunately. The dojo arenas, who can actually please join all of those there. You'll get the notifications on Lichess in your inbox or right
Join
here
the
for the
dojo to
most
get
part.
notifications of scheduled events which always feature an increment and a time control worth learning from https lichess.org team master chess dojo etc about doing your best.
So in this particular instance, can you challenge me with points? I have a lesson coming up in a short moment, less than 10 minutes away, so it's not going to work at the moment. I would refund you if you already have given it. But we're purely a little quick, not quite just chatting, advice stream here on preparing for your next tournament. So with the tournament tomorrow, Nico, I would certainly review your openings as well as try to get to 67 every single day in Puzzle Street. 67 every single day in Puzzle Street. So for example, if you can reach 67, it shows tremendous willpower, character, determination, and I'll tell you one more secret, the first 70 exercises are actually quite easy. The first 70 exercises are quite easy. So if you are preparing for a tournament, whether it's next week, next month, or this weekend, certainly preparing overall on a daily basis by working on Puzzle Streak is key. Now, of course, if you leave Puzzle Streak in the middle of a streak,
A dojo legend and long time support set. https www.twitch.tv Salakai.
very good. 2032 is a great rating. I believe that you're slightly higher than me, as my rating has tumbled and tumbled and tumbled into the supremely low category at the moment. I was much higher rated than you, 20, 35, less than 40 years ago, FIDE was. In any event, then when we go back to Puzzle Streak, we can actually continue it. And very often it gives you the same exact exercise. And this is browser related. It keeps it in the cache. If you have a Windows update or an Apple update or an iOS update, whatever operating system you might be using, it may wipe out your cached pages. And this did happen to me on cheese.com. I lost my streak of my survival streak of around 68 or 69, maybe 70. I took in a break. I came back a couple weeks later, forgot about a Windows update. You can't do a challenge today, but you could absolutely do a challenge on a different day, or maybe later this afternoon if I stream again in 3 hours, which I think I'm going to do. Finishing up our advice stream, there are 3 things about Puzzle Streak that I love. The fact that you can work on your calculation as the puzzles get extremely difficult, so you're working on your character and not moving. And really, you're overcoming obstacles and things that could go wrong for the most part. Here, we're going to make a simple move such as checkmate. Then we're going to remove the defender of G7. And then we're going to dive right in because there are several moves here that we could play next, perhaps, that are all good. Actually, I don't see any, but queen to H8 though. So, and then you'll also be able to, I expected an endgame by now. I'm actually expecting to see or get an endgame by now. This pawn is going to promote in 2 moves, by the way. We don't need to take the material in order to win this game. We have to do everything, by the way, with check. As is, what is our opponent's big idea? Our opponent's big idea is checkmate in 1. We cannot afford to make a quiet move. So because our opponent's idea is checkmate in 1, we're going to have to make sure that every move occurs with check. And on this particular note, we'll have yet another skewer. And we'll capture this knight, and it'll be checkmate for white in short order. So for the most part, we haven't had an endgame arise yet. It's rather tragic. But here, we're just going to simply remove the defender of the f6 square. We can spot the weakness on f6, and we're good to go. You actually get quite a number of good endgames in Puzzle Streak. They don't appear this early on in the game, but you do get them. Now, I don't understand what the big idea is here. This looks like it's just capture, right? But trust nothing, check everything. Next up, you can check your own openings, and you can do a little bit of a survey for yourself. In your profile, you can actually go to the Opening Explorer, and you can test or see what openings you prefer or play best with. So, for example, 65%, 62%, 65%. I probably will not be playing E3 or G3 in Reykjavik. But you can guarantee that you could see all of the other moves that are 60+%. A3 may or may not get a rest. That was played against Magnus Carlsen in the World Rapid and Blitz. And that game ended in a draw, by the way. I probably will not be playing C3. You can already tell that those handicapped moves with C3, E3, and G3 are off the table. It goes also with my dislike for the black lion as black. Imagine that you're playing black and you play D6, C6, knight to D7, E5, queen to C7, bishop E7, knight on G to F6. I mean, I don't understand what's going on in that position, but I've already made a clip on Twitch that I dislike the black lion because it does not teach players how to open up lines and get their pieces out efficiently and learn how to coordinate their pieces efficiently. So, getting back to our opening book, basically, our opening explorer in this particular case, we're going to have an A repertoire and a B repertoire. We're going to have the B repertoire, which is going to be slightly riskier and must win, and I'm feeling energetic. And I really want to go for it. But our A-level repertoire, our top-tier repertoire is going to be Joe solid, rock solid, king of the hill type chess where we're willing to grind it out against anybody in the world. And that's the type of chess we have to play against stronger, more highly rated players. Now, imagine for a moment if we're playing black. Now, we do have to make some decisions when we're playing the black pieces. You need two decent opening repertoires with the black pieces. Personally, I love the Carcan or the French. Absolutely love the Carcan or the French. You can already see over here that when I am black, I've played c6, c5. Now, when I am energetic, I am almost always going to be playing c5 or g6 or knight f6. I'm going to be playing c5, g6, or knight f6. When I'm feeling energetic, I want to play for a win, I must go for it. These three moves are going to be my go-to choices. You can already see that I'm scoring 63, 64, and 68% with not just the Alekhine, but e5 with answering e4 with e5 is Joe Solid. Now, if we want Joe Solid to show up at our A-tier openings, by the way, rock solid chess, I would say that we're answering e4 with e5, which explains the prevalence among strong players, or we're playing the Carcan. Now, against d4, because I have to bring this to a close, and I do have to comment on d4 in particular, you have knight f6 as a universal, I can play against everything opening knight f6. Now, whether or not you want to choose an A-tier opening with an IMSO Indian, or whether or not you want to choose a very energetic opening, such as I'm not even going to risk it and say something like the Budapest or something like that. Those are not really, those are what I would call C-tier openings. But you could play the King's Indian. This is Karip's A-tier opening for the most part. Certainly one of the best openings you can choose is black. You do have to put a certain amount of time in so you don't get crushed. You don't actually have to put a lot of time in to play the Nimzo Indian. You have to remember, though, that your pawn break with c5 has to come in at all times. So if you are playing in this rock-solid chess-type position, you need to be able to play c5 almost immediately and nullify white's opening advantages. And all in all, against the English opening, I highly recommend just a symmetrical English. If you are a g6 player, you can certainly play a la Bobby Fischer and lock down on that particular square as quickly as you can. And I have a game in the database, I believe, where my opponent played e3 and then we mimicked each other in a symmetrical English here. You cannot go wrong with a symmetrical English. There's so many good things about the symmetrical English. If you get d5 in, you are much less likely to lose for the most part. So, for example, even if they get in d4, we exchange once and we just play d5 and everything is roughly equal. Against all of the other openings that you might face, such as the King's Indian attack, f4, I highly recommend just taking over the center with d5, c5, and e6, knight f6, bishop e7, castles. Just play good, solid chess. If you don't, and I repeat that very severely, if you don't play good, solid chess, if you don't take over the center, if you don't afford yourself, remember, who has the better piece harmony, better piece coordination? Don't create problems for yourself by playing, and I have had this happen to me recently, where black will play d6, knight to d7, e5, bishop e7, c6, and queen c7. They play this black lion nonsense where I am at war with it today because I feel it's limiting people from becoming better players. Please don't do that. To remember the long game, yeah, I believe that it's better to drill the old way indeed. That is what you absolutely should do on almost every occasion. You can do tactics such as that and just hang in there, review your games, go back and review your games when you get a chance and give it your best shot. Be very, very diligent and diplomatic. Now, this advice stream was meant mainly Puzzle Street, 67 exercises a day. You can get a wide variety of early positions, middle game positions, and end games. And you're going to have to be able to not move in order to win those games. So for the most part, please, please, please make sure that you are drilling every day, playing every day, doing the right thing. And thank you very much for being here. Cheers and ciao, everybody. Ron, great to see you. Happy New Year. Your next moves will be your best. Keep it up. Have faith.